Hello and welcome to episode 77 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. We have a loaded show for you today. Later, Marissa from Chicago will be here to start our conversation about what is right and what is wrong with Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. When most vacationers think about a Walt Disney World vacation, the first thing that comes to mind is looking down Main Street, USA at Cinderella Castle. That being said, Magic Kingdom as a park can be a mixed bag, and we'll start with the negatives this week before looking on the brighter side in episode 78 next week. We're also going to welcome my wife Courtney in a few minutes. We had an all-you-care-to-enjoy breakfast at a hotel in the Disney Springs area that's not an official Walt Disney World resort. We're going to discuss that meal. There are actually a lot of nice places to stay that are very close to the action at WDW, but can save you a lot of money. I'll start things off, however, by giving an overview of a lot of the food items I tried during the first week of Epcot's International Food and Wine Festival. Before we get started, you all know by now that I'm going to have to promote my fundraising efforts for CASA of Pinellas County, Florida. Last month, I walked Ireland's National Famine Way to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. Earlier this week, I did an interview with a local journalist named Lauren that will air on Radio St. Pete in St. Petersburg, Florida, talking about this journey, and I'll have a lot more about the trip on the podcast and the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. I am getting this information out to as many ears as possible so we can raise as much money as possible for survivors of domestic violence. All I ask is that you take a few minutes to donate just $10 to CASA at casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/ and every dime will go to the organization with no processing fees and without a middleman. If 100 of you donate $10 this week, we'll have raised another $1,000 for survivors. That will make a real difference. That's casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/. Now let's get into Epcot's International Food and Wine Festival. The festival got started last week at Walt Disney World and will last until November 19th. There is still plenty of time to catch the food and wine this year. The following list consists of only items I was able to try in the first week, and you can catch videos of these items on the YouTube channel. Earth Eats is the vegan booth for food and wine and is sponsored by Impossible. This is a great place to start the day because it's near the entrance of World Showcase, and the food items are both substantial. You may end up eating a lot of sweets around Epcot. The Impossible Burger Slider is a returning item that really gets a lot of praise from vegetarians and meat eaters alike. As in previous years, the real star of the show here is the wasabi sauce. It adds just enough of a kick with the slaw to bring out a bunch of different flavors. This booth also has the Impossible meatballs with a pesto sauce, taking this dish, made from the same base ingredient, in a completely different direction as far as taste is concerned. Having just returned from Ireland, I had to make sure to hit up the Ireland booth, which is next to the Rose and Crown pub near the UK pavilion. As a vegetarian, the only item that I could have there was the warm chocolate pudding cake with an Irish cream liqueur custard, and this is also an item that has been a staple of the festival for a number of years now. The cake is very soft, and the pudding center adds a lot to the texture. Obviously, it is that Irish cream liqueur custard that balances out the flavor from being too chocolatey. Don't worry, if you don't drink, the alcohol is burned out in the cooking process. Kids can have this dish. Continuing around World Showcase to the Greece booth, which is in between the Moroccan and Japanese pavilions, you can get two great items here. The spanakopita is solid. It certainly isn't unique to anybody who has a lot of Greek food, but it is really tasty. The unique item here actually is the Griddle Cheese, which is a hunk of cheese that is literally cooked on a griddle with crushed pistachio nuts on top. I had this last year and it wasn't as good. This time the pistachio added a little sweetness to the burnt taste of the cheese. Honestly, I think last year it was too burnt. It was overcooked. This is an all-around great item. Don't sleep on this one. Refreshment Outpost is the area in between Germany and China and is a permanent booth. They do, however, have 2 exclusive items to the festival. The first is a watermelon Dole Whip, which is a must-try on a hot day in World Showcase. Epcot can get very, very toasty, especially with the festival starting in mid-July the past few years. This is my favorite incarnation of the Dole Whip thus far, and it really, really does work on a hot day. The other thing I grabbed is the spicy Githeri. It's a mixture of white beans, pigeon peas, Ben's original quinoa and ancient grass medley, and kachumbari slaw. The Githeri is 100% plant-based and is a hearty dish to go along with your sweet watermelon Dole Whip. Have the 2 of these together if you're thinking of trying either of them. Heading back to the front of World Showcase, you'll find Shimmering Sips. This booth has the plant-based guava mousse. If it isn't clearly stated, most any mousse you get at Walt Disney World will have gelatin, which is not vegetarian, at least depending on the particular rules of the individual vegetarian. It is certainly not vegan. This guava mousse is vegan, which is really nice. It's served on a sugar cookie with coconut lime whipped cream. I don't normally like coconut, but the flavor was subdued enough to not distract from the overall flavor. I loved it, and more importantly, I really enjoy having mousse desserts, and I hope Disney finds more ways to make them vegan. Brew Wing at the Odyssey is in the building that used to be the Epcot Experience. When it poured on the first day of the festival, my group ducked in here to escape the elements while I tried the crispy Brussels sprouts with buffalo sauce. I had these last year, and not a lot has changed, but they are seasoned in a slightly different way. This is an interesting thing to try if you like buffalo wings. It might be a lighter option during your theme park day. Finally, I ate at the Fry Basket, which is near Test Track. The adobo yuca fries are plant-based and come with a garlic cilantro aioli, which is perfect. They were salty but not too salty, had the right amount of crunch, and the aioli was a good portion without forming a puddle at the bottom. The yuca fries are my favorite new item I've had in 2022. Definitely give them a try no matter what type of food you like. They are also gluten-friendly as well. I was also able to get the Fry Flight by removing just 2 items to make them vegetarian. It was no trouble to adjust this order. The flight comes with plant-based sea salt malt vinegar fries, barbecued bacon fries with smoked aioli, and sweet potato casserole fries with candied pecans, toasted marshmallow cream, and caramel whiskey. Just ask for no bacon and no marshmallow to make it vegetarian. All 3 of these fries were great, and I would recommend eating them in the order that they're served, left to right. The sea salt and malt vinegar fries are a great appetizer. The barbecue fries are a heartier entree, and the sweet potato fries were a surprisingly good dessert. These things were like candy. I will continue to try more items from Epcot's International Food and Wine Festival, and I will keep adding the videos to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Right now, let's welcome my wife, Courtney, for a dining review. This segment was recorded right after we had the meal, so I'll be using my portable recorder, and you'll notice a difference in the sound. This is something we're doing so that the experience is still fresh in our minds when we are reviewing. Thanks for joining me, Court.
Thanks, Rick.
So we recently stayed at the Wyndham Lake Buena Vista Disney Springs Resort, which is an incredible place to stay. This was our second time staying there. It is within walking distance of Disney Springs, but it's not technically a Walt Disney World hotel, which is really good because the prices are a lot more affordable than hotels of the same quality that are Walt Disney World hotels. This is basically like getting a moderate Walt Disney World resort for less than the price of a value. You would definitely pay more to stay at one of the all-star resorts than to stay at this hotel, and I think there are a lot better amenities, not to say anything bad about the value resorts, because we like the value resorts as well, but this is sometimes a better option. Just look into it when you're planning your next Walt Disney World vacation. That is where we had breakfast at Lakeview Restaurant that is in this resort. And this is an all-you-care-to-enjoy buffet-style breakfast. And I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed it. What did you think of it, Courtney?
It was good. It's good to get a really solid breakfast in you before a theme park day. And we knew that we were going to be taking it a little bit easy, and we weren't rushing to get into the park as soon as it opened. So that it was good for that, but also the food was good.
Yeah, the restaurant actually stopped serving breakfast around 11, and we got in there at about 10:30. So we kind of rushed through this, but we got a lot of good food. I got the scrambled eggs, which were okay. I don't think they were all that great, but sometimes you just feel like you have to get scrambled eggs with breakfast. They had breakfast burritos that were vegetarian. They did have real egg and they had cheese in them, so they weren't vegan, but they were vegetarian. And I thought they were fantastic. I just put a little bit of hot sauce on them, and they had peppers. They had obviously the eggs and the cheese, and that was a really nice surprise. You don't normally see that in some of these breakfast buffets that you would get elsewhere on Walt Disney World property. Of course, they had the infamous, famous Mickey waffles, but these weren't the little Mickey waffles that you would get at some of the other hotels. These were really, really big Mickey waffles. That was fun. I enjoyed those. It's always nice to start your Disney day with a Mickey waffle, whether you're staying on property or staying just off property. It's one of those things that is so ubiquitous with a Walt Disney World vacation. Our view was amazing. We had a view of Lake Buena Vista. We had a view of the pool. We could see some of the hotels in the distance. That was a great part of the atmosphere of this resort. And there was a make-your-own omelet bar, and I had them make me an omelet that had all of the vegetarian options, none of the meat, all of the vegetables. It kind of came out being like a Western omelet with 4 different kinds of cheese. Man, was that good. I thought the overall experience was great. You got your soda with the meal. You got your coffee with the meal. All of those things were included. Now, I think our first strike against it's going to be the price.
A little. I believe it was $27 per person. And, it's just a little pricey. Was it anything special? No. It was kind of pretty solid food. But I think, like Rick said, I agree with the scrambled eggs. They were a little bit of, a weird consistency. I'm not exactly sure what kind of, I think egg substitute thing that they used. Didn't seem like a fresh, normal scrambled eggs. But you still had a variety. You did have fresh fruits, cheeses, oatmeal, almost anything you could think of. There was some cereal, bacon, sausage, etc. So pretty much get your money's worth, but I do think it was maybe a little more expensive than what it was worth. And you can get buffets that are a little bit more unique and maybe have some better options that are the same price on Walt Disney World property. So that's why I would say I think it was a little overpriced.
There are 2 things that made me think it was overpriced when we were there. The first was that we only had a half hour, so we were definitely rushing. It felt like we were trying to just pick up anything that would help us get our money's worth. That was on us. We decided to sleep in and not rush to get to the theme park, so we just got there a half hour beforehand, and we didn't realize they would have this great of a selection. So I will say that that was nice. Like the potatoes that we got, for example, I hadn't even mentioned them yet, but they're regular potatoes mixed with sweet potatoes, mixed with those purple potatoes, and they were all cooked like breakfast potatoes. That was a very unique dish, at least something I'm not used to eating. It was good, but we felt like we had to quickly rush and just get a little bit of everything so that we would have it. But that was on us. That's not their fault. The only other thing that made it seem expensive to me was that earlier that week, I had actually had breakfast at Boma in Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge, and it was about the same price for my breakfast. And anybody who's been to Boma at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge, Courtney and I have done a review of the dinner. That is a much, much better overall experience than this restaurant here. Just being at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge and being able to see the savannah with all the animals is probably worth $25 a person. And then you're getting $4 or $5 extra for the breakfast. I do not regret eating here. I think it was a really great meal to have before a park day. I would recommend it if you're staying at this hotel. If you're staying at this hotel, you're probably saving enough money to make this breakfast worth it once or twice throughout the course of your trip. But it probably should be a little bit cheaper when you compare it to Boma, which is a much, much better value with higher quality food and much, much cooler theming. But great way to start a park day. That's basically my review for this one.
I think I'm in total agreement with you here. Again, good way to start a park day, a variety of breakfast items, nice service, the omelet option was nice. It just wasn't anything particularly unique or special to warrant that price. And we do know of other breakfast buffets or other breakfasts which are the same price, which exist on Walt Disney World property, which are, they feel like a better value or feel like they're worth the price because they are a little bit more unique and they're in a differently themed area as opposed to just a nice hotel.
Thank you so much for joining me once again, Courtney.
As always, thank you so much, Rick.
It's now time to welcome our good friend Marissa from Chicago. I appreciate you being here, Marissa.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to do what's right and what's wrong with Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. And I think this is one of those topics where there's so much on both sides of the ledger that this is going to be a really, really good conversation. As always, we start with what's wrong so that we can end with what's right and end on a positive note. So, Marissa, your first thing that's wrong with Magic Kingdom.
All right, well, I'm going to start with a real softball, obvious one here, and that is the food. There are some things that I'll talk about in the right section. I'll save it for there, but for the most part, the table service and quick service food options at Magic Kingdom are not great, and they don't have much variety. There's really not a whole lot of table service options that are exciting or really as worth your time and money as there are in other parks. And I think that, you know, the food is a definite low point of Magic Kingdom when you're there for the day.
I would almost say that it's so much average food that it almost feels bad because it's just so average and so mediocre. There are some really great restaurants. Eating at Be Our Guest is a fun experience. Cinderella's Royal Table, a fun experience. I'm not a huge fan of Jungle Skipper Canteen and that atmosphere where the waiters and waitresses kind of tease you and are joking around the whole time. But if you are into that, that's a good atmosphere. As far as the food goes, though, there's just nothing spectacular. The quick service locations are all right. You have Pecos Bill, Columbia Harbor House. These are okay. Then there are just garbage quick service locations like Cosmic Rays, Pinocchio's Village House. The sit-down restaurant's not great either. I've often said the best quick service dining option at Magic Kingdom is to take the monorail over to the Polynesian and go to Captain Cook's. It's just not a great food park, and it's unfortunate because it probably should be one. The only positive I will say about it is you're so busy at Magic Kingdom, you don't need as many good sit-down dining locations as like Animal Kingdom, when you're walking around the park and it's a slow pace and there's only 9 rides, so you're not running from ride to ride all day. Hollywood Studios has some sneaky good restaurants, but once again, you're only dealing with 9 rides, so you don't have to have a day that is full of standing in line. But still, they definitely got to step up their food game. I'm going to move on to what I think is wrong with Magic Kingdom, and I'm going to get the elephant completely out of the corner of the room right now, because anybody who does not stay on property, whether you're an annual pass holder who's a local who visits regularly, whether you're somebody who stays off property and has to drive to the theme parks, it is just a pain in the backside to get to Magic Kingdom. If you're driving, first you have to drive to the TTC and then either get on the monorail or get on the ferry boat. Maybe if you're adventurous, and I have done this before, you just walk that new walking path all the way around the Polynesian and the Grand Floridian, and then walk up to the main gate at Magic Kingdom. This problem is proof that Walt Disney's ideas were not always perfect, because this was his idea, and he wanted to have this grand reveal for Magic Kingdom. And that's awesome for the first time you ever visit Magic Kingdom. And every time after that, it is a hot mess. And Walt had all these plans for Epcot that it was going to be its own city and it was going to be a completely different thing than a theme park. And people in the company were like, no, that idea is not going to work. I don't know why they stuck with this one after Walt passed, because it's a nightmare. It is such a hassle to get from off property to Magic Kingdom. It was only made worse during the heights of the pandemic, when they were limiting how many people could get on a ferry boat, how many people could get on a monorail. I could probably talk about this for a long, long time, and I'm just going to stop it there. But the transportation situation to get to the Magic Kingdom, Epcot, you just park right in front of Epcot and just walk right into the park. Animal Kingdom's parking lot can be a little bit weird, but it's fine. Hollywood Studios, you park like 7 rows away from the gate. But at Magic Kingdom, you park in a gigantic parking lot, and then you have to walk or take a tram, get on the monorail or the ferry boat. It takes like 40 minutes to get from your car into the theme park. Rant over. What's your next thing, Marissa?
Really quick on that, though. You're completely correct. And just to illustrate, when I was back at Disney World in 2017. It was my first time there in years and years. And my friend and I had an early breakfast reservation. We overslept and we were like, oh, we don't know if we want to trust the bus. Let's just Uber it. Well, we didn't realize everything that goes into, taking a car to Magic Kingdom. So we had to get in the Uber, take the Uber to the TTC. Then we ended up taking the ferry over. And it honestly probably would have been faster if we had just waited for the next bus. It was such a headache, and it made me so glad that I was not a local who has to deal with this on the regular. So I can only imagine how frustrating that has to be, having that as your only way to get to Magic Kingdom.
And because of that, I just don't go very often. The only times I go to Magic Kingdom anymore are if they're putting out new decorations for a holiday, when they brought back Festival of Fantasy Parade, when they started the new Adventure Friends character cavalcade. Like, it's only if there's something new. And that's a double-edged sword, too, because if they're doing something new, then it's already going to be a crowded day at Magic Kingdom, which makes the entire problem worse. And if it is one of those fear of missing out moments, like new holiday decorations, a new parade, or something like that, that also appeals mostly to locals. So it makes the problem even worse after that. So it is just a really hard park to get to for the majority of guests who are there on any given park day. And I hope they find a way to keep the magic of seeing the castle for the first time from far away and getting to it, but somehow letting you skip some of that process. Anyway, what do you have next, Marissa?
All right, so on the topic of crowds, I'm just going to roll with it. And I'm going to say that one issue with Magic Kingdom is a lack of adequate queue space for some of the rides. And one that comes to mind immediately is Haunted Mansion, where that queue backs up all the way past the Liberty Bell sometimes. And I mean, it blocks walkways. People are confused about, what's this line for because it's so long. And when you get queues like that are backed into the walkway, then you get choke points. Then you get people who, try to cut the queue because they don't even realize how far back it goes. And I think that the lines are getting longer in all the parks. Long lines are just something you deal with at Disney. But for some reason, they feel especially visible at Magic Kingdom.
I feel like Haunted Mansion was such a great example, too, because sometimes you're waiting out in that line during the day so long, and you're inside for such a short amount of time that your eyes haven't even adjusted yet when you're getting on the ride.
Yeah, and then you're kind of going through this ride to half darkness where you're like, what am I even supposed to be looking at here? Which is so disappointing for people who, don't get to go frequently, and this might be their only chance to ride it, that then they don't really get the full experience.
Absolutely. I'm going to move on with my next thing that is wrong with Magic Kingdom. And this one might not be fair, but you're always going to make comparisons. No matter what it is in life, you start dating a new significant other and you're going to compare them to the last significant other. You go to a Burger King, you're going to compare it to the McDonald's. Knowing that Disneyland Park exists and is so similar to Magic Kingdom, but is almost universally better in almost every way. There are a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, the way that they take advantage of space at Disneyland Park. Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, I personally think those two rides are so much better at Disneyland. That's where Galaxy's Edge is over on the West Coast. Indiana Jones, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Like, their Fantasyland over at Disneyland is just packed with rides, and when you think about it, there just aren't that many rides in Fantasyland at Magic Kingdom. The comparison makes it really, really hard to appreciate Magic Kingdom when you've been to Disneyland Park.
The second you said comparison, I was like, oh, I know where this is going, and you're correct. It's one of those things where, if you go to Disney World frequently and then switch over to Disneyland, I feel like it's probably even more apparent because then you're experiencing all the differences and they're very, very clear, especially on rides like Space Mountain or Pirates or Haunted Mansion. That's one of the reasons that I really want to get back to Disneyland to experience those again. And, then maybe I can jump in and say, really, really contribute to how much better it is. But in the meantime, I'm going to take Space Mountain and go with it. And I'm going to say the next thing that's wrong with Magic Kingdom is Tomorrowland. And I know, Tron's coming, that'll change it, that'll revitalize it a bit. But Tomorrowland right now desperately needs some TLC. You've got what used to be Stitch's Great Escape, that then became a Stitch meet and greet, that's now just an empty building. You've got Buzz Lightyear, which is a fun ride, but could definitely use some updates. You've got Space Mountain, which is same situation. Please give us a new track because I love that ride, but it hurts sometimes, and I don't love that. People Mover is great, but it breaks down all the time. So it just needs, it needs something. And when you walk into Tomorrowland and it doesn't feel futuristic, that's kind of big swing and a miss on the theme itself.
We all love the People Mover, so we're just going to set that aside right now. The People Mover's great. All the Disneyland people are like, I can't believe you're complaining about Tomorrowland and you're complaining about how Disneyland is so much better when you get a people mover. I understand we have a people mover, and that is awesome. However, when you think about Tomorrowland at Magic Kingdom specifically, and you're thinking about 3 major attractions. Space Mountain, which has a horrible, horrible track. It is really bad on your back. Like you mentioned, they just need to do something to it because it is way too rough of a ride. We're not talking about it being a thrill ride. Of course, it's a thrill ride. It's a roller coaster. It's supposed to be thrilling. It's not supposed to hurt. Then you're talking about the Carousel of Progress, which is awesome, and I love the history behind it. But this is Tomorrowland, and it ends with a joke about a video game that looks like it was from 1982. So it doesn't feel futuristic. It's a great attraction. I love it. I enjoy doing it every once in a while, but it just doesn't have that Tomorrowland feel. And then worst of all, I'm just going to throw this in as the next thing that's wrong with Magic Kingdom, and that's that they have the Tomorrowland Speedway, which is such an incredible waste of space. It is a huge, huge space eater. Doesn't have a lot of capacity. It smells like garbage. It doesn't feel like the future at all. It's something that is basically the same version. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and there's something almost identical to it at Hershey Park. And I'm not putting down Hershey Park, which is great for its purpose, but it's not supposed to be Tomorrowland. I hate that this ride exists so much. And the fact that it's in Tomorrowland is just baffling to me almost. And it always has such long lines. I don't get that. It smells bad. The sun just beats on it. Like you mentioned with the queues earlier, the entire queue is outside. It's not comfortable at all. If it rains too much, they have to shut it down. If it rains too much, you're standing outside in that queue in the rain. It's Florida, so it rains all the time. It is just a hot mess of a ride.
Yeah, it's one of those rides where, like, I can't believe it's still there. I can't believe that they haven't even proposed a new plan for it. It's kind of shocking. I feel like right now, the only really thing it's good for is you get kind of a close-up of the Tron construction at one part. And outside of that, what's the point? It's just a bad ride overall.
Just the other day, I was on the People Mover with a friend, and we went past it, and I started complaining about it. And I was like, you could fit, honestly, 5 rides. You could fit 2 more Fantasyland rides, which would fix that problem with Fantasyland not having enough. And you could fit like 2 or 3 Tomorrowland rides, and all of a sudden 2 of your problems are solved just by getting rid of this attraction that's not very good.
And even if they were like, we need a driving car attraction in Disney World, okay, for whatever reason, if that's how you want to use the space, why wouldn't you update it at least? Especially like you were saying, it's Tomorrowland, and you've got these vehicles that are spewing this gasoline smell, and nothing about them feels futuristic. Why wouldn't you at least update it or give it a fun theme? I know it's been talked about to the ends of the earth, but a Wreck-It Ralph theme would at least do something. It would give it some life. But instead, it's just trucking away as is, making that whole area smell kind of noxious. Not great.
And Wreck-It Ralph probably would be a good ride to put there because it's right there on the edge of Fantasyland as you enter Tomorrowland, and Wreck-It Ralph kind of has that vibe too, where it's in both of those worlds. Doing something, because when you're in Fantasyland, when you're back at Pete's Silly Sideshow and you're in line for Dumbo and you're hearing these cars revving their engines because you're so close in the Dumbo queue to where people get on and off of the cars at Tomorrowland Speedway. So you're just hearing this noise constantly. Anyway, I don't want to be too negative. I want to start moving on to the positives. So before I do you have any more things that are wrong with Magic Kingdom that you specifically wanted to mention?
I guess the only thing would be that because of the crowds, and this is a little nitpicky, I'll admit, I'm sorry, but because it is one of the most crowded parks, when things do start to break down or get worn down, they can't really shut down the ride to fix it because there are so many people in the park. You need everything you can to eat as many people as you can. So it leads to things like Splash Mountain desperately needing, a refurb and some mechanical fix-ups, but they can't dedicate the time to it. So it just opens late every day and randomly goes down throughout the day instead. So that's just something that gets kind of frustrating, I think, as a guest in Magic Kingdom, because you want to plan out your day, you want to experience these things, but when they can't dedicate the attention to saying, okay, this really needs some work done, then it kind of lowers the quality of the attraction sometimes.
I agree with you. I'm also going to add that there are a lot of rides that go down at Magic Kingdom when it rains. Talking about Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, Splash Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, the Barnstormer. When it rains, the lines for all of the indoor rides just shoot up like crazy at Magic Kingdom. And as we've seen a lot recently, Magic Kingdom also floods a lot. It has a couple points where water just builds up on the ground and it can flood, and that can be so frustrating. But I really appreciate you joining us, Marissa. As always, it's a pleasure to have you.
It is always a pleasure to be on.
We're going to continue this conversation with what we think is right with Magic Kingdom in episode 78. For my wife, Courtney, and for Marissa from Chicago, I'm Rick Doherty, and this has been episode 77 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We'll be back next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.